Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning in it feels very fall. My name's Anna Palmer. I'm the CEO and one of the founders of Punchbowl News. And we are very excited for everybody in person and those that are joining us on the live stream as well for this pop-up conversation with Senator Marsha Blackburn, of course, the Republican from Tennessee. We're going to talk news of the day. We're going to talk mobile technology security, App Store, all kinds of hot topics in Washington right now. After our conversation with Senator Blackburn, we're going to be joined by Sumit Sharma, senior researcher at Consumer Reports, and Karen Thomas, the founder and CEO of Agrin Health, for a fireside chat. And of course, a big thank you to our sponsor, the Coalition for App Fairness, for making a conversation like this possible. Just a reminder, if you don't already subscribe to our free morning newsletter, you can do that at punchbowl.news. And of course, we are on all social media platforms at Punchbowl News. With that, let's welcome the senator on stage, Senator Blackburn. Thank you so much. All right.
Yes.
Okay, well, we have got a packed room and lots to talk about.
Yes.
As always, we start these conversations with a few news of the day questions just to kind of center us in what's happening in the world. And there's no shortage of politics to talk about today. We're a little less than 3 weeks out from the midterms. Democrats felt like they had a pretty good summer, August in particular. But if you look at a lot of the polls, a lot of where kind of the energy is, Republicans are feeling better. I know you are out there campaigning for a lot of your colleagues, right, going to Arizona, maybe going to Iowa, checking on a lot of these candidates. What are you seeing happening right now?
Yes, and first of all, thank you for having me, and congratulations.
Thank you very much.
To you and Punchbowl.
Thank you.
Doing great. When I'm out and about with our colleagues, we continue to hear a lot from people that we're meeting. They're talking about inflation, pardon me, the economy, jobs, really a lot of conversation around how much inflation is impacting at the grocery store, at the gas pump, children's clothes, what you're having to pay for fees for sporting events. And women are talking a lot about the decisions they're having to make, whether a child does a travel soccer team,
right,
or a travel ball team, because of the expense that is involved in that. So economy and inflation is at the top. Crime is a big one, and it doesn't matter where you go. There is a linkage between crime in the streets, the gangs, and the drugs that are coming over the southern border, and the impact that that is having. We hear a lot about that from law enforcement. And then parental rights, education, what children are being taught, how they're spending their time in the school day, what that focus of the school day is.
So talk to me about the 50-50 Senate, right? We've been in that situation for as long as kind of modern day history. Do you think Republicans will take the majority?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes. So that's the first one. All right, that was easy. I'm not surprised by that answer, but will you support Mitch McConnell to become the majority leader?
When we look at taking the Senate, we want to make certain that we're ending up, I think you're going to see us end up at 52, 53, maybe even more. Depends on how lightning strikes. You have to look at how these races are playing out. And then after that is done, we will get to the leadership races. And at this point, I don't think there's anyone else that's raising their hand to run in leadership races. What we want to make certain is we take the majority and we deliver for the American people. They want action when it comes to the price at the pump and groceries, addressing food shortage, dealing with parental rights, reining in the federal government, dealing with crime. And we hear this repeatedly. And I think that engagement is a really good thing for the American public. And I think it is very, very good for women. I like to say security moms are back, and they are back in full force, and they want those communities safe, kids safe.
I want to talk about one more thing before we get to the topic of the day, which is kind of end of the year funding package, talking about safety. Ukraine funding has been one of the hot button issues. My colleague Jake Sherman, one of the founders of Punchbowl News, was with Kevin McCarthy, who would be likely the next Speaker of the House if Republicans take that majority, saying he's concerned, or he believes that there's going to be a lot of Republicans who don't want to just write a check or keep writing a check to Ukraine. Have you heard that? Do you have that same feeling? And then does that mean that maybe there's going to be a larger kind of Ukraine package at the end of this year, just given the new dynamics?
Well, much of that is the hypothetical. As
you know, we like to play things out here at Punchbowl News, see what's going to happen potentially.
But there is frustration with the administration for how slow they were to recognize that there was an issue. I wrote the administration this time last year, sent a letter to the White House. Look at what Putin is doing. Look at where he's amassing troops. Now's the time for foreign military cells to be sure Ukraine has what they need to defend themselves. And of course, they chose not to do that. Of course, they chose not to go on the front end with sanctions. So Ukraine needs things to defend themselves. And it is important for transparency and accountability, knowing how that money is being used, where it is going, whether it is military or humanitarian aid. There's been frustration with the lack of transparency and accountability and the lack of a timeline. And Anna, the other thing is, this is on Europe's doorstep. Yeah. And it is important for NATO, for the EU to step up. This cannot be America alone. And we need to make certain that the EU and NATO are doing their point.
Okay. All right, let's talk big tech and app security, because we could be here all day. There's obviously been a ton.
No joke. We could be here all day on this.
There's been no shortage of different policies coming forward and different folks coming forward. I want to just talk, number one, Senator Amy Klobuchar has been pushing for this vote on a larger tech antitrust bill before the end of the year. Yeah. She's been kind of pushing, trying to say that there's 60 votes. What do you think is happening there? It doesn't appear to be that that's going to actually happen before the end of the year.
Yeah, and you know, from my perch, being on commerce and judiciary and SASC and VA, each of my committees has a component that touches these issues around IT and AI and AV and EVs and all of that. So I really appreciate having that opportunity. When I look at it and go back and look at this long term, Anna, I think what we need to do is identify the problem and then target a solution to that and be more specific. And Karen and I, and you all are going to get to your panel in a few minutes, talking about how we don't know what's the next thing to come. Right. We don't know what the next delivery system is. We don't know what the next utilization will be. So we need to be very careful in how we move forward legislatively. Legislation takes a lot of time, and technology goes through a new iteration. It changes very quickly. And I think that we are very well served to identify a problem and then to be targeted, not to try to be far-reaching. When you talk about American innovation, and if I ask for a show of hands, who all thinks we should protect American innovation? Everybody in the room would put their hands up. See, there you go. I mean, automatic response.
Agreement in Washington rarely happens.
That's exactly right. There's bipartisan agreement on that. But you have to protect the innovators, and you've got to give them the ability to work. And we were talking about how in Tennessee, back in the mid-90s, when I was leading us through the analog to digital transition as a part of the governor's cabinet. What we realized was some of these platforms that were used in the entertainment industry would work in financial services, would work in healthcare, and all of a sudden, and you begin to have people asking that very important question of, what if we did this? Now, those innovators need the space and the ability to ask that, what if? And we don't want to just cap innovation at where it is right now and say, that's good enough. We want to give it free rein.
So talk about your bill, what you have a more, as you say, surgical approach. So you're not supportive, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you're not supportive of the Klobuchar bill. What are you supportive of kind of moving forward if potentially Republicans have a majority and you're in that position?
Well, and looking forward to having that gavel and being able to help drive this conversation. But yes, as I was saying, what I'm for, protecting that innovation. When you talk about the Open App Market Act, one of the issues that had come to me from people that I come in contact with there in Tennessee, as they are working on new systems and new utilizations, was a frustration with Apple and Google and the way they put demands on innovators to put that in the App Store, in the Google Store, the way Google Play Store is preloaded on the Androids, the way they require, the way Apple requires their payment system. Of course, we know Apple is more restrictive than Google is when it comes to the apps. And people want to be able to be in direct contact with their consumer. They want that business to consumer. They want that third-party access. So this is something that says, okay, we can be more effective. Innovators are going to be able to have that direct exchange of information, be able to handle their updates. They want that contact. So the Open App Market Bill would do that. Still has provisions in there for privacy, still has provisions in there for security. And us in the U.S. looking at this, addressing this issue of market access is something that is a trend globally. Right. And you can go through and look at the countries that are looking at this. Of course, the EU just did the DMA. I've had the opportunity to meet with some of those parliamentarians from the EU and talk with them about where they're heading, whether it's the DMA or the DSA, that they are working on, trying to look at content moderation, look at competition, those issues. So that is something that very much I'm for. The other thing, when you look at Tennessee and what is happening in our state, you also see not only what is happening in health, right, but you also see financial services. You have to look at Oak Ridge National Lab, which the world's fastest computer, we've had Summit and Frontier, and it is there. The work that is being done in blockchain, the work that is being done in quantum, the utilizations that they're reviewing for these. You look at distributive ledger technology. You look at how this can be used to solve problems. You look at data transfer. There are endless opportunities there. We have an UT Oak Ridge Institute that is opening some new opportunities for work here. You also have to look at what's being done with Space Force, Huntsville, and then Arnold Engineering. We're doing the hypersonics, we're doing the AI, we're doing the AV. All that testing is being done in Tennessee. So being certain that there's a productive environment. That should be the question we ask.
I want to talk about the global environment. Before I do, I want to zoom in because as much, you have this package. Washington is being inundated on all sides about what is the future of this kind of regulation. You recently spoke to Tim Cook of Apple. You were just a little critical of kind of the Apple Store, how restrictive they are. What did he say to you? Bring us in.
Well,
as much as you can. Just
right.
all your friends,
all my friends, the few hundred. He is not a fan of the open app market bill because he is not eager to do away with a revenue stream. Mm-hmm. But I believe having the open app market bill will strengthen their ability to have a stronger base. Google's a little ahead of them on this. As I said, Google is not as restrictive. Apple should do well to realize they have gotten where they are. Bear in mind, the iPhone was not a thing until 2007.
Right.
And look at what that brought about for new utilizations. You can do your life on a device. So I think my bill will open up the ability for there to be more utilizations. So I think it would serve Tim Cook and Apple well to be very supportive of what I will do as chairman of Consumer Protection and Data Security.
There you go. All right. Always interesting to understand kind of how CEOs and others are trying to kind of bend the ear of a senator, particularly somebody who's super involved in these issues. I do want to talk about two other things that are at times going to kind of quickly come to an end.
See, we could talk all day about this.
I just started.
I told you need to have me back, and we'll talk about this after the first of the year.
All right, you heard it here first. Yeah. She's coming back. But I want to talk about the global. You mentioned that because what's happening in the EU, what's happening in some of these other countries, right? Oftentimes the EU is moving faster than the U.S. Legislation takes a long time. What is kind of in a short, if you can, and the 30-second, 60-second concern you have if the U.S. doesn't legislate here? And what is the global impact of that?
Okay, a couple of things. From the technology side, standard setting. And we should all be concerned about that. And then from the development end is if they get ahead of us. I mean, bear in mind, last 2021, $170 billion spent on apps, 230 billion apps downloaded worldwide. This is a global reach. What we should be doing is saying, what do we as legislators do? What are the steps we take to make certain that we are the right innovative environment for the brightest minds on the face of the earth? And that means that we do some things, that we look at guidelines when it comes to privacy and data security. I can't believe it was 10 years ago I filed the first privacy bill. And still, I'm asking that question every time I get the chance to people. Who owns the virtual you? When it comes to health information, who owns that? When it comes to your online transactional life, who owns that? We need to do privacy. We need to do data security. Wicker and I did the Safe Data Bill. Yep. We need to get serious about putting these guidelines in place. When you look at Bitcoin, when you look at crypto, when you look at, as I said, the growth in quantum, the utilization of blockchain, what are we going to do on transfer rights? All of these things, see, all of this is going to have a global impact. When you look at cross-border transfers, making certain that we are continuing to lead. And I have, in the past couple of years, whether it is Canada, whether it's the EU, whether it's the UK, whether it's New Zealand, talked with legislators who are involved in this. And you know what they want? They want us to lead. because we are a leader in next generation utilizations. We are a leader in innovation. So why are we skittish about moving forward in this space to give these IT innovators what they need to know where we're going to be on these issues?
All right, last question. We oftentimes in Washington don't have a lot of bipartisan people working across the aisles, but I know you have worked extensively on the Kids Online Safety Act.
Yes, I have.
Talk about, obviously its importance, but then, it seems like this might actually have a shot here in terms of getting done maybe end of the year. You've been working with Democrats on that.
Yes, indeed. Senator Blumenthal and I, last Congress, I chaired the Technology Task Force at Senate Judiciary Committee, and he was a wonderful participant in that. Of course, he's chair of Consumer Protection Data Security. We continued to hear from parents. I'm a mother and a grandmother, and it is heartbreaking to me. It is just a wrenching experience to hear moms talk about how their children, especially during the pandemic, got onto social media, and then that is where they met a drug dealer, a pedophile, a really bad actor. And some of these children have committed suicide. Some of these children have developed anxiety issues. And Senator Blumenthal and I said, this is something that transcends politics. And what we developed is the Kids Online Safety Act. It came out in July. It is ready for a floor vote. We need to pass this and give parents the toolbox they need to work with their children, 16 years of age and under, work with them to make certain that their online experience is safe. This is whether it is one of the social media platforms, what children are being exposed to on YouTube, Instagram, through video games, these interactive video games where they can invite a player in, and then you find out that is not a 14-year-old, it is a pedophile and a bad actor. Parents are asking for this, providing safety online for our children. This is something we should do. There is broad bipartisan agreement. I am encouraging Senator Schumer to move this forward quickly so we can get it to the president's desk and have that transparency, that accountability, those tools in the toolbox for parents to work with their children.
Certainly something we will be watching for potential action before the end of the year. Senator Blackburn, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
I'm delighted to join you.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
All right, now I'd like to welcome Karen Thomas and Sumit Sharma to the stage for our fireside chat. Come on up. Get a front row seat there. Yes, it should be on.
Is it on?
Yes, yeah. Well,
Did you hear everything I was saying?
Yeah. No, we turned it on for now. All right. Well, first of all, thank you both so much for joining me this morning. I want to kind of give you a second. Karen, you're coming to us from Tennessee. Talk a little bit about Agron Health, your relationship, and kind of participation in the Coalition for App Fairness.
Sure. So Agron Health is a female-founded health tech company headquartered in Nashville. We are a tech platform that gives people one place to get quality healthcare information, tools, and access to resources that they need to manage their family's health and wellness day to day and collaborate with their care team.
Great. And Consumer Reports, most of us probably know it, but talk a little bit about your role there.
So I lead Consumer Reports competition policy work and advocate on that. Consumer Reports is about 80 plus years old now. We have about 6 million members who pay a subscription. It's only $35 a year. If you aren't members, please do become members. And that's what funds all our work. And we survey our members regularly and also more widely to keep abreast of issues they care about. And the App Store and digital tech is one of the issues I do care about. So.
All right, well, let's get into what we care about here today. Karen, I was reading this morning while I was getting ready for this conversation that you, in the Tennessean, have kind of talked about and written about your thoughts around the bill that Senator Blackburn is supporting. Talk about what it would mean for a company like yours.
Yeah, so we had a situation last year. We were humming along, growing, and then we got notice from Apple that they discovered that we had a path that was not in mobile where we were getting revenue. And our iOS app was no longer going to be eligible for any kind of enhancement, including bug fixes, until we took all of that functionality, moved it to the iOS mobile app, and ran all of that revenue through Apple, where they, of course, take their 30%. So, for a young company that's getting up and running and growing, to have Goliath come in and just say, "Oh, we're so glad you're doing well. We're here for our 30%," even though we had nothing to do with it. So we went back and forth with them for a while to try to help them understand that we weren't, trying to game the system. This was literally revenue that they had nothing to do with, had nothing to do with services on the mobile app. And they said, "We don't care."
So you just had to,
we
fix
don't care.
it.
Yeah, so for us to do that would have been 6 to 9 months worth of development, hundreds of thousands of dollars. We would have effectively stalled out our roadmap rollout to do this so that we could have the privilege of just handing over an additional 30% of our revenue to Apple. So really, fortunately, we were in a position where we could change our business model instead. And we went back to Apple and we said, "You know what? We appreciate you bringing this to our attention. There's a better way we can serve our members, and that's by making all of our consumer-facing products completely free."
There you go. Interesting.
But we're unique in that because there's a lot of companies, young health tech companies, and not just health tech companies, period, that are in the mobile space that don't have that option.
Right. We'll talk about that. I mean, from a consumer perspective, what are your concerns? I mean, obviously, she's kind of coming from the business perspective, which would be very frustrating. You're looking at revenue, you're trying to figure out, kind of projections. Things have to change on a dime. But from a consumer perspective, why are you more supportive of what Senator Blackburn is pushing in terms of the act? Sumit.
So I think Senator Blackburn mentioned this. We do our lives on phones today. It's everything we do on a phone. It's the banking, it's social media, we read news on the phone, etc. But that's just part of it, right? And then you look out one layer, you got wearables, you got smartwatches. Then you look out another layer, and then you have smart speakers, all the connected devices in your homes. And you look out another layer, and it's connected cars. So this device, our phone, is really crucial to how we control all these things today. And unfortunately, today, we're in a position where there are two companies, Google and Apple, who are gatekeepers. So if a business needs to get to an Android user, they have to play by Google rules. And if a business needs to get to an Apple user, they have to play through Apple rules. And so there's this question of, I, as a consumer, am no longer directly in a relationship with my service provider. And that has a bunch of implications. For example, you look at pricing. On your phone, you don't see pricing offers like Christmas offers. If you go to a supermarket, Christmas time, you get special offers. App developers and service providers on the phone can't do that. As a consumer, it's much harder for me to change and switch from one ecosystem to another because the incentives of these companies are to keep us within the ecosystems. They innovate, and they're innovative companies, but their incentives are to keep innovating to keep us in that ecosystem. That makes it harder for me to switch, which means less competition, which means they can charge me more money for various things. For example, as a $40 Bluetooth headphone should work as well with my iPhone and connect as easily as Apple's own $130 headphone. That doesn't happen because Apple doesn't allow us to do that. Look at smartwatches. The Apple Watch is a great product, but there's very little competition because there's no other smartwatch that would function as seamlessly with an iPhone as an Apple Watch. So consumers lose out in terms of choice, in terms of prices. And then, of course, there's a question of innovation. There's much less innovation on the system because the 30% app tax means some products just don't make it onto the market, right? And another important point here is about single product firms, right? So if you're a firm that's only making a healthcare app, it's difficult for you to compete with Apple, who does everything. Or if you just do a smartwatch, it's difficult. So it's this question of being able to mix and match services. You know, if I have an Apple phone, I have to buy an Apple speaker for it to work properly with it. That means I have to pay for that. I should be able to mix and match with different services. So that's another way I see consumers saving money. So, sorry, go on.
We talked a little bit at the end with the senator about just this global race in terms of regulation, what's happening in the EU, what's happening in different countries versus the US. Obviously, legislation takes a long time. It doesn't appear that this is going to be solved, certainly, or at least there's not going to be legislation passed before the end of the year. What impact does that have as you think about kind of going forward in your projections, Karen?
So, like, you know, when you're a young company, you're always looking at, 12, 18 to 36 months ahead, and you're very sensitive to headwinds, right? Because the smallest change in the market means a big deal to you. And so we're very sensitive to the timing of it, right? The longer this draws out, the longer we have to find more creative ways of surviving until we can get to a more open market. And so, for us, I'm actually a big fan of the role that the app markets can play, right? And that is making sure the technology is sound. There's no viruses, it's not malicious, making sure there's nothing illegal going on, making sure that people have a really fundamental understanding of what that app does and what it has access to. Those are all very valuable services. The challenge that we've run into is that through their virtual monopolies, Apple and Google have taken that valuable service and they've amped it up to their own benefit, now doing things like deciding what market prices are going to be. And even in healthcare with COVID, they're actually regulating healthcare apps and deciding who can have a healthcare app and who can't. I mean, that's way outside of the bounds. So for us, the Open App Markets Act is a great first step at cracking that code. And here's the thing where we sit, our perspective is, now that it's on the table, there's no going back. It either gets passed and we send a signal to Apple and Google that we're not fans of monopolies, we're fans of competition, we're fans of innovation, or we don't, and we send the exact opposite signal of, we're not going to do anything about this, so feel free to do whatever you want and continue to push the envelope even further.
On the global side of things.
So I think this is an important point, and we are very quickly coming to a position where we are lagging behind, and consumers in the US will get a worse deal as a result. So, to the extent that there's competition in Europe on the App Store, you can totally see consumers there getting cheaper prices for the same product than we do. You'll see more innovation there than in the US. So, and to Karen's point, this is an important signal for these companies. If they can beat this legislation back, which is a very middle of the road, just setting fair market rules for these markets, where we have clearly identified problems, not just in the US, but there's consensus worldwide that there's an issue here. And if they can just bat that away, they will be free. They'll say, well, we can do whatever we want to do. So there's a deterrent effect if the US goes ahead with this, in terms of how these companies behave, not just in the US, but globally. But if in the US we don't pass something like the Open Up Markets Act, then not only does the US market suffer, but then these companies can use that to also beat back legislation in Canada or some other places as well. And a good example, by the way, of Apple controlling what businesses can do on their platform is recently Apple increased prices for all apps unilaterally in Europe from 99 cents to €1.20 or something. And that's something that Apple decided for all app developers. It's not the case that each app developer individually decided, well, I need to charge a bit more because of exchange rates or whatever. Maybe some of them would have left to themselves, have offered that, kept the price the same and offered it for a lower price. So there are real restrictions which are placed which harm consumers.
I want to finish this conversation in a way that we often do, which is you have a stage. We have a lot of folks here that are working on these issues, that are in person, as well as joining us on the live stream. What's one thing that you would tell lawmakers up on Capitol Hill that they should know when taking possible action on issues like this, or keep in mind?
This is more than just about app markets and technology. This is about the future of innovation. The future of innovation is the future of the economy and the competitiveness of the American society. this has ripple effects far beyond just what's in this written document.
All right.
So I would say we fully support this because, this bill does not take away any choices. If there's a consumer who wants to keep living in the Apple ecosystem or the Google ecosystem, she can do that. It's about providing more choices. It's about opening up that ecosystem. And as I mentioned earlier, it's crucial we do something on this because it's not about the phone. But, you've seen now, soon, your choice of cars might depend on whether you have an iPhone or an Android phone. Because, there'll be these car displays, and Apple has this ambition of taking over the whole car display and running the whole car. We don't want to live in the world where you're stuck in one of these ecosystems. We want a more interoperable system, and we must take action. Plus, for all the reasons we said earlier, if we don't do anything, we really are giving these companies a free pass. These bills are popular, they're bipartisan support. I don't really understand why they haven't been passed already, to be frank.
All right. Well, that's the last word this morning, but not the last word, I'm sure, that Punchbowl News will be taking in terms of conversations about this issue as it continues to percolate on Capitol Hill. I want to thank both of you so much for joining me. Thanks Senator Blackburn and her team for joining me on stage as well. And, of course, to the Coalition for App Fairness for making this conversation possible. Thank you so much on the live stream for joining us as well as in person. Have a great day and stay safe, everybody.